name is Alabanza and I'm an artist that lives and works in London. I'm 21 years old and I grew up in Bristol. At the moment I'm the artist in residence at the Tate, which means that for the year I'm going to be running workshops with 8 to 16-year-old, mainly kids of colour, from schools with like a high percentage of free school meals, but we're interacting them with art within the gallery. Part of my artwork and my performance art is like mainly about my experience of being like black and queer and non-binary, meaning that I don't identify as male or female, and I think I kind of knew that from like a really young age. I always knew that I wasn't a boy, and it was always like a huge stress for me growing up, knowing that that was like on my shoulder. But I didn't really know what that meant because I knew that I wasn't a woman as well, so I didn't really have the language to describe like how my gender felt. I think the queer part, or like coming out, was kind of easier for me. I didn't really ever do like a typical coming out thing. I didn't write like a status, I didn't like stand up on the lunch table like in school or something like that. I think it was just like pretty obvious what was happening, and I was lucky to have like quite a supportive mum, or a really supportive mum, that didn't really force like coming out as a norm in our house. She just kind of would always ask like me, oh, do you have like a girlfriend, or then would add like a boyfriend at the moment, and made it kind of like natural. So I think that really helped me develop an easier like coming out at home. Like with my family I didn't really need to, I guess, when it comes to my sexuality, which I thought was really helpful, because it meant that like home wasn't really a pressure for me to like conform or anything like that, which I feel like maybe is quite a lucky experience when I chat to like other queer friends that I have. But I think school was like different. I think I found myself at school like performing into a masculinity that I thought was needed in order to like survive and get through like secondary school. Like I was lucky I was never like bullied or anything like that, but I think that's because I was so obsessed with performing and so obsessed with like wondering like, okay, am I allowed to do this or allowed to do that? And I think going to a school with so many different types of masculinities being on show, it meant that as someone that like doesn't really know what masculinity is or has never been really good at performing it, I tried really, really hard all the time. I played football, was actually really good at it, but even that was kind of like this weird trial for myself, because I played until, I was on the football team until the age of like 14, 15, and doing it from the age of like 7, and that's like one training every week and then a match on Sunday. And like for someone that hated every single moment of it, and for someone that like hated the locker room, and for someone that hated like even like the how like engrossed in masculinity the whole setting was, I stuck at it for like a really long time. But I think that's because I thought that like no one would know I was like not straight if I like managed to play football, which was obviously like absolute shit because everyone still knew. And it wasn't until I moved for sixth form that I kind of was more open about where I was at. I think before, like when I was doing my GCSEs, like everyone knew, and it was just something that everyone knew, but we didn't talk about in order to like still have friends, I guess. As if like as soon as they accepted the fact that I was queer, then they'd have to make the decision whether to be my friend. But I moved to like a bigger sixth form in the centre of Bristol, that was like a lot more queer friendly, and a lot more like, there was loads of different queer people there, and it was definitely more like artsy, whatever that means. So yeah, I think that's when I started maybe like expressing myself more. When I first started going to like queer things and being in the queer scene, like I started going to like gay bars and stuff underage at like 16. I think I thought that like this was it, and I thought that I was like really, really happy to like find that space. And I can remember for like 16 to 17 being like fooled by like what the space I was in, thinking that this was it. And I think when I like reflect, I started to like definitely, whilst moving towards the queer scene, like abandon like the cultural things that I had like grew up with at home. Even like symbolically as well as like literally, like I started, not that this equates to like getting rid of your culture, but I think for me it was like I started like dyeing my hair really, really light bleach blonde, and like straightening my afro to make, or trying to straighten my afro to like make it into like a quiff. I started to like pretend that I liked certain music when I really didn't. Like I never liked Katy Perry or Lady Gaga, but I thought that like part of this queer scene that I was walking into I needed to. And I remember like instantly thinking that something was up in these clubs, like knowing that something wasn't right. I experienced like a lot of fetishization, a lot of like, I was still presenting quite masculine at the time. And I think as like this light-skinned person walking into this like majority white club, I knew that like the eyes on me were like eyes that were also racializing me at the same time. Had quite like a lot of aggressive racialized sexual experiences with white gay men, and that was kind of like the thing for 2 years, and I thought that that was all I was really gonna ever experience. And then moving to London, I met like more and more queer and trans like people of colour, and kind of realised that I didn't need that scene. Like my experience in the LGBT scene I think is one of like more direct racism than I've ever experienced within like outside of that scene. I don't know what happens, but I think it becomes heightened in like, I don't know if it's because you let your guards down because you think you're meant to be safe in the scene and then like it happens, or that because they feel they're oppressed in other ways that they relax about the racism that they've been taught. But I think up until like now I'm still processing like so much of the racism that I had to like experience in the LGBT scene. Like people touching your hair in the clubs, and I mean that happens in all clubs. I feel like it happens even more in like the gay clubs that I was going to. I've had so many like people on like online dating profile sites, you know, compare my skin to chocolate, or like assume how I'm gonna act because like I'm black. I recently did a show, Stories of a Queer Brown Muddy Kid, last year that toured, and within that like myself and 2 other of my friends that are also like black queer men recorded and like annotated and looked at like social media interactions they'd had with other white queer men, and we like screenshotted it and kept the receipts, and it was all these like really harmful receipts of like white men like assuming that we're tops, or asking where we're from in Africa, asking if we want to do like slave role play, all these things that like happen in the gay scene that no one wants to talk about. So I left it, I got out, and I've like found a community of like queer and trans people of colour that means that like I think whereas before I was like abandoning parts of my culture, I'm just now like rediscovering them and realising how to me like my blackness is queer, they're not like separate. I guess for me dating was always tough because naturally as I started being more like authentic in my gender expression, you're not just experiencing like the possible racism when dating, but you're also experiencing like the transphobia that happens. I think there's lots of people that used to want to date me or be interested in dating me, and then will see me like after not seeing me for a year, and will see me in a club in like a dress and makeup or stuff like that, and the face changes or their response changes to me. Like I think femphobia is really real. I think like transphobia is so prominent within like LGBT spaces, like that's really affected like who or what I date. But I think for me like the changes was like with myself, like I stopped caring, and that was like the best bit. Like I stopped like searching and looking for like Stephen or Michael, and like rather like found my own community that like will like love me, and like I've made like conscious choices like not really to allow like whiteness into a lot of my like dating or like romantic situations, not because I don't think that you can like date that, but because I'm not ready for like the complications that that may have. And I think like I'm dating other trans folk, and I think that's like a really loving experience. I see like dating as queer people of colour as like a radical act, and it's a radical act to like loving yourself, to love someone that's like so similar to you, and love someone that shares so many identities to you. And it's really beautiful to be in a relationship now where like you're putting on makeup together and comparing makeup and looking at and celebrating each other's like feminines, rather than like previous relationships where I definitely hide parts of like my femininity, or not want to be in like a dress or these things around them. Yeah. Yeah, I think that like in terms of how much people are talking about trans issues, like it's definitely grown. I think there's been like a lot of more like high profile like trans people in the media, like people know who Laverne Cox is or know who Caitlyn Jenner is. In terms of like whether or not that's improved like the quality of life for like trans people, particularly like trans folk of colour, like we can already tell like it hasn't, like so many murders of like black trans women just in the past month. But also like the conversations around like transness is still really binary in the like terms of like how we're talking about trans issues. Like I think people still don't really know that like non-binary people exist, or that like when I exist in spaces people are often like questioning like when I'm going to like transition, and like we're still in this really like I don't know, dated way of talking about trans issues, that we're talking about like people that are transitioning in a certain way. So I feel like we're talking about it more, but like I don't actually think like any awareness has like improved. My safety like certainly like I haven't noted like a safety, like an improvement in how safe I am on the streets. I've definitely received way more like post-Brexit hate on the streets to like my body and the otherness of myself. That I don't think it's like changed. And yeah, I think almost like I say like Caitlyn Jenner's like really rich, and Caitlyn Jenner could afford like a transition that was almost deemed acceptable from like the media. Like she's still white, she's rich, and also she could make herself look a certain way that people can then accept her. Whereas like my transness will always, because it's outside of the binary, because like because I'm never passing as anything, I haven't seen like an improvement in those narratives. Like I've still not ever seen someone that looks like me like on the telly or like in a newspaper or something like that. I think it's really hard working with like young people when you yourself are maybe presenting in a way that's like often ridiculed from the outside world. It's hard like going to work in certain outfits and like 2 minutes before having to run a workshop with a young person being like called a tranny outside of your workplace. Like that's really difficult to then wonder if the kids are also going to do the same. And I'm not going to like lie and say that like there's no kid that is ever like rude about how I look, but I definitely think it's more coming from teachers than kids. Like I think there's an age, and it's really interesting for me looking at like the genders that care as well, and I think it's definitely about masculinity and like how masculinity is taught to us and patriarchy, because it's young boys and it's like boys hitting a certain threshold at like 12 or 13 and upwards that suddenly notice, oh, the person that's teaching them is wearing makeup, or they have a head wrap on, or they've got earrings or a dress. There's definitely like when I'm running workshops from 8 to 12 years old, they don't even blink, like they're like having so much fun and like literally not even recognising what could be happening. But I feel like there is an age where suddenly like there's this shift in like how they feel. And at first it was really hard, because before, when I wasn't being authentic in my gender, like I was working with the same kids and we were vibing really well and getting on well. So it's tough like sacrificing maybe some of that easier like parts of my job for myself. But I think it just takes like confidence. I joke about it. Like if I note that a student's looking, I'll make a little joke. I'll be like, it's okay to look and ask questions, let's carry on, we'll have a bit of a laugh, or like something like that, and they'll get over it. But the teachers don't. Like the teachers are still completely shook up that they've had a workshop ran at these institutions by someone that they're like seeing as a man in a dress, or whatever that means. So I think it stays with the teachers more. But I think what's great is that I can always also spot, like, a lot of the times, the queer kids that are being really affirmed by being taught by me. And I think about how, like, when you're young, you maybe never had, like, an openly queer teacher, like, teaching you, especially one of, like, your race as well. So for me, like, all of that uncomfortableness is worth it if, like, there's a black or brown kid that's, like, a little queerdo like me, and is like being like, yes, I see you, and I'm like, I see you too.
If you could go and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give to yourself?
Chill out. I think I'd say like chill out in the like nicest way. I think you'll find people that are like you, and that you are not like alone in this like existence, and that I tell my younger self that like you'll begin to like really, really love your blackness, and that it's temporary, this like uncomfortableness with all parts of your identity, and soon they will just feel really like natural to be. That sounds like like a cheesy Disney movie. Like, what's that really natural to be?